Hey everybody, and thanks for tuning in. And today we're going to be cooking hot cross buns, that Easter classic. And this recipe is guaranteed to fill your kitchen with the smells of nutmeg, clove, cinnamon, mace, orange and lemon zest. This recipe is a little beauty. Let's get cooking. Okay, so let's crack on with the spices. Now I've got 6 allspice, I've got 1 centimetre piece of cinnamon, a clove and a little bit of mace, which is the outer husk of the nutmeg. And I'm just going to give those a grind up in the spice grinder. Now, if you want to use powdered spices, that's no problem at all. I'd probably suggest a pinch of clove, a pinch of mace, 3/4 of a teaspoon of the allspice and 3/4 of a teaspoon of cinnamon. And then I'm going to go in with a really good grating of a nutmeg. Okay, so in this mixing bowl, I've got 500 grams of strong flour. The protein content is 13.2% for those who are interested. And to that, I'm going to add all of the spices and just disperse that well through the flour. Now, I'm going to be adding orange and lemon zest. This is kind of optional, but I think the fresh, kind of zingy quality of these citrus fruits really balances out those dried spices well. And I'm adding probably about 1/4 of the zest of the orange and about 1/4 of the zest of the lemon. On the hob, I have gently warmed 325 grams of milk, that's 3.5% fat, 60 grams of white sugar has been dissolved in there, along with 10 grams of sea salt. And I've just brought it up to kind of body temperature. And then I turned off the heat and I laid on a 7-gram sachet of yeast and left that for about 5 minutes. I've added all of that to the dry ingredients, and now I'm adding probably about 1/2 teaspoon of really good quality vanilla extract, and then 1 whole egg, and that weighs approximately 50 grams. And then using a hand, we're just going to make sure that all of the wet ingredients are well combined with all of the dry ingredients, and we end up with kind of a big sticky dough ball. And then we're going to add 50 grams of room temperature butter. And now it's time to work that dough a lot harder. We want to make sure that all of the butter has been well distributed throughout this enriched dough. So just keep working it probably for about 2 or 3 minutes until everything starts to feel a bit more silky and smooth. Now in go our dried fruit combination, and you can get a bit experimental here. You know, you can add whatever tickles your fancy, but I've got a weight of 200 grams here. I'm using some little raisins, some sultanas and some cranberries. And again, we'll give that a good work around to make sure everything's dispersed nicely throughout that enriched dough, and then straight out onto the work surface. Now, for small manageable quantities of dough, I really enjoy mixing with my hands. I think you develop a really good feel for what's going on. But of course, if you want to use a stand mixer, that's absolutely fine. Add the dough hook attachment, and I'd suggest using it on a low to medium speed. But if you do work this on the countertop, then don't add any bench flour. Resist the urge to kind of stop it sticking. And this is for 2 reasons. The first one is the sticking of the dough is going to help us move it around. And secondly, we don't want to change the hydration of this dough. It's quite a wet dough, and that's important because all of the dry fruits that we've added are dry. So they are naturally going to take away some of the moisture from the dough. Now, it's going to feel like this is never going to come together, but I promise you it will. Stick with it, keep moving it around, and gradually you will feel the dough become more manageable and a lot smoother. And at that point, you can use some sort of bench scraper and just bring it together into a ball. And we're going to leave this covered in a bowl to prove for between 1 to 2 hours, dependent on the temperature of your kitchen. So the dough was out proving on my work surface in the kitchen for about 1.5 hours. My temp is 18 degrees Celsius. Now I'm going to get this weighed out, and then I'm going to divide it up so I've got 12 equally sized dough balls. So just gently push out the air, and I'm going to roll up this piece of dough ready for cutting. Now, if you followed this recipe, you are going to end up with dough balls in the region of 100 grams. Now, of course, you don't have to weigh these. You can absolutely eyeball them. But if you've seen any of my previous videos, then you will know that I've got a bit of OCD about making sure the dough balls are all the same size. So I'll just weigh these off and obviously add a little bit more dough or take some away, depending on what the weight is. And next up, we need to form these into dough balls. Now, you can do it any way you want really, but this way works quite well. You take one piece of the dough and then using your hand in a circular motion, you apply downward pressure, but not too hard. Really important not to use any flour again. That will allow the dough to stick and turn around on itself. And here you can see the dough's not nearly as wet as it was earlier, and that's because the fruit has now started to become hydrated from some of the liquid that was in the dough. Now, there was a reason for me picking that magic number 12, and that's because 12 dough balls fit perfectly into a standard oven tray. So I've just lined the bottom of this one with some non-stick parchment paper and give it a light dusting of flour. And then starting in the center, I'm going to put a row of 4 and then another row of 4 on the right and another row of 4 on the left. And it's important to leave these evenly spaced with a centimetre or 2 gap between them, because they obviously need room to prove and room to spring when they go into the oven. So these have been resting for about 2 hours on the side, covered by a plastic bag. And as you can see, they've risen appreciably and just started to touch on the edges, which means when they get that final bit of oven spring, then they'll fuse together nicely and we're going to get this web of hot cross buns. But before they go into the oven, I like to give them a light brushing with beaten egg. And that simply is a whole egg whisked up with a pinch of salt. And this is going to help with the glossy finish at the end. And to make the paste for the iconic cross that makes these hot cross buns, I've dissolved 30 grams of sugar into 30 grams of milk and then mixed in 80 grams of flour just to make a really smooth paste. And then it's as simple as piping it straight on. And if you watch, I just keep the piping bag going across in one motion and the mixture naturally finds its own way to sink between the gaps. And then we're going to go straight into the oven that's been heated to 200 degrees C. They're going to bake for about 15 minutes and turn them once during the cook. Now, as soon as these come out of the oven, and definitely before they cool, I like to give these a brush with a sugar syrup. It's just equal quantities of sugar and water, 50 grams of each, that's gently been heated on the stove. And I like to do this because it gives these hot cross buns a really nice glossy finish, but it also protects the outside and keeps it fresh. It gives it a really, really nice texture. So I gently brush all of them with the syrup and then leave them probably for about 20 or 30 minutes to cool before I actually dive in, if of course you can wait that long. Okay, let's give these a whirl. Always have mine toasted with some butter. Oh yeah. This has zapped me right back to my childhood. These are packed full of nostalgia and packed full of spice. You get that cinnamon, the mace, the clove, the nutmeg, the touch of vanilla. Awesome, just the right amount of sweetness. And as you bite into it, you get this burst from the succulent fruits. The high hydration really helped kind of plump them up. That's a great little recipe. And listen guys, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps. Click to subscribe for my future content, and I will see you again very soon. Stay tuned.